Our world is strange and creepy, with many things we just can't explain. Is it us that are in an alternate reality to other things? Do they see us? Do they hear us? And do they get afraid? Or are things, either good or bad, reaching out to us from the other side? I guess time will tell. They will be missed. Glenmont, New York, USA, 1998. Harold offered an interesting background with his experiences of death, and was certainly no stranger to the idea of death and loss. He said that his backyard bordered a cemetery, and recalled that he and his best friend Charlie used to hang around the cemetery as kids, and it was practically their play area. They would bike around the curvy roads lining the rows of graves and play there for long periods of time. He says that they were respectful and curious about the graves. New graves in particular were quite the curiosity, and that he and Charlie would visit the graves of small children and place a small flower on each one. When this next incident occurred, however, Harold's grandmother had just recently passed away from colon cancer in March of that year. Harold said that he happened to be the first person to know that she had passed away, and it's something that stayed with him for a long time. He remembered that after she passed, he walked into the funeral home and saw her lying there in the casket. This sad image, he says, has since been burned into his mind. It was Harold's habit to sleep with the television on, and he would set a timer so that it would switch off automatically later in the night. On this particular night, he lay in bed thinking about his grandmother. It was true, he was sad at her loss, and he struggled to get the emotional image of her lying there in her casket out of his head. The light of the television screen filled his room until he fell asleep. The next day, his friend and his friend's mother joined Harold and his mother to watch the film Patch Adams with Robin Williams. They were all sitting on the couch as they watched, and they enjoyed the movie. After the credits started rolling at the end of the movie, out of nowhere, to the left of the television, there were trickles of light that started to appear to come in from the window. There also appeared what looked like shadows of leaves and tree branches, as if there were some extremely bright light source coming from somewhere. The only thing was that they could not locate the actual light source. Just as they all looked at each other in amazement, all of them confused as to what was going on, suddenly a mist started to appear in the room. What was even stranger was that the mist started to look like it was taking the shape of something. Harold says that he couldn't make out the shape, but it was almost as if the mist deliberately was trying to take the form of something. As that shape started to take form, then bright orbs of shiny light started to dance all around the misty figure. Harold says that they weren't really scared, but they all looked at each other in stunned disbelief. Then, just as quickly as the mist and orbs appeared, maybe some 20 seconds or so later, it started to fade away, and within 30 seconds, it was completely gone. They never spoke about that incident since then, but deep inside, Harold always wondered whether it was his grandmother paying them a visit, or if someone from the cemetery behind the house was paying them a visit. The hardest part for him is that he may never know. These are all real stories that happen to real people, just like you. These people have shared their experiences with me, and now I'm retelling them to you. If you'd like to share your experiences, please get into contact with me by email or through our website. What's at the door? Mount Druitt, New South Wales, Australia, in the 1980s. Amy lived with her parents here as she was only 10 years old. They had lived there for some years, but over time she developed a strong dislike for her own bedroom. She refused to go into her room and even got to the point that it was very disruptive for the family, and she did not like to go to sleep in her own room. Being 10, she was no longer little enough to stay in her parents' bed, but she would often flatly refuse to go into her own room. Now, as an adult, she recalled to me the reason that she had hated her room so much, and she got the chills as she did. She described her situation. She would very often be lying in bed or even just hanging out in her own bedroom when she would see something in her doorway. She described them as strange-looking or deformed animal-type beings. They were about her height and described them as having large, terrifying eyes as well as large, sharp teeth. They stood in the doorway of her room, and she thought that they were trying to get at her. There were always more than one, and they just stood in her doorway, staring at her. She also noted that sometimes this would also happen during the daytime and wasn't exclusively a nighttime thing. They were so scary, but didn't make a sound. They wouldn't move so much as to only follow her around with their eyes if she moved around the room. Her best defense was to try to hide under a blanket and simply hope that they'd go away. She would be so terrified she couldn't leave her own bedroom as a result, and she wouldn't go into her own bedroom alone during the day or at night. And, as stated, she tried to sleep outside of her room as much as possible. Interestingly though, Amy said that as they stood there staring at her with their terrifying gaze for what sometimes could be hours, it seemed to her that they were unable to get into the room to get at her, almost as if something was stopping them. She could never figure it out, and eventually they seemed to go away after a few years. But she could never forget what was at the door. I love hearing your true creepy stories. I think we all love the creepy and the strange, and that's why we're here. Ghosts, demons, UFOs, aliens, cryptids, urban legends and more. If it's creepy and weird, it has a home here. Strange Happenings, Richmond, New South Wales, Australia, circa 2000. Amanda lived in Richmond with her boyfriend at the time. They had been together for some time now, and during that time she had developed a very close relationship with her boyfriend's family, and his grandmother in particular. It was sadly the case that her boyfriend's grandmother would soon pass away, and her loss was understandably felt in the family. Amanda in particular really felt the loss. She felt such a deep connection to that lady, and the family was still in mourning when this strange thing happened. During that time, Amanda recalled feeling like there was a spirit around her, and this was because strange things started to happen in their home. Where there had never been any issues before, suddenly there were flickering lights and strange noises that seemed out of place. So much so that she'd actually asked her landlord if the place was haunted, and the landlord thought she was crazy. What was actually crazy was what happened next. She and her boyfriend were awoken one night to a very loud and clear knocking on the wood railing of the bed. It woke them both straight out of their deep sleep, and they both half sat up in bed and just stared at each other in shock. They looked around for the source of the noise, but they couldn't see anything anywhere. They feared that maybe it was an intruder, but the place looked well secured from where they were. While they were in bed, still trying to figure out what had just happened, it may have only been 30 seconds or so later, they heard another knocking, but this time the sound came from the laundry sink. Amanda went out to see what was happening in the laundry, as her boyfriend got up to make sure no one had broken in. Just as they had suspected, The house was properly secured and locked up, and Amanda soon discovered that the laundry sink was about to overflow with water. She hadn't realized that she'd left the tap running ever so slightly, but that she had also left the plug in the sink so that the drain was blocked. Amanda was convinced that this was her boyfriend's grandmother warning them that the sink was about to overflow. Strangely, the incidents or coincidence of the paranormal didn't quite go away immediately. A few days later, Amanda was catching a taxi home. She had been shopping and had a few bags, and as she sat, she was having a chat with the taxi driver. She noticed that he seemed a little bit distracted, but he was polite and attentive to her questions. Soon, she discovered why he seemed distracted. He noticed that she had some items from a spiritual shop and asked if she knew anything about spirits in the house that didn't want to leave. Amanda was shocked at the question, and although she told him she couldn't really help him, she asked what was going on. His demeanor suddenly changed from distracted to him looking very worried and scared. Reluctantly, the taxi driver explained to Amanda what had happened. He told her that he was convinced that there was something in his house. He said that he didn't believe in spirits until now because he no longer knew what to believe. He told Amanda that he had been painting his house and doing general repairs and maintenance, and on this occasion he was in the lounge room fixing a chandelier. Suddenly, he felt a firm hand on his shoulder. He turned around to look at who it was, but there was nothing there. Since that time, he explained that this had become a common occurrence in his home, whatever it was. He also told Amanda that he lived there with his wife and children, but didn't want to scare his family, so he had kept it all to himself. This show is made possible by people like you sharing their real-life experiences, so please feel free to contact me. Thanks for joining me on this creepy adventure. Until next time.